Welcome to the SmartKeys podcast. Imagine spending hours preparing this massive project update, only for your manager to cancel your check-in like 10 minutes before it starts.
Oh, yeah. That is, we've all been there, right?
Right, we totally have.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly frustrating. And honestly, it just shatters trust almost instantly. Yet it happens every single day in, organizations all around the world. So today we're taking a deep dive into a topic that occupies a massive chunk of your calendar, yet rarely gets the strategic engineering it actually deserves.
Which is wild when you think about how much time we spend on them.
Exactly. We're talking about the one-on-one meeting. Specifically, we're pulling from this fantastic, really comprehensive article from smartkeys.org. It's written by Felix Römer, and it's titled One-on-One Meeting Template: Conduct Productive Check-ins in Less Time. Our mission for this deep dive is to extract the most strategic, actionable insights from this resource. So whether you're a manager trying to lead a highly distributed remote team or, just an individual contributor wanting to get more value and career growth out of your weekly check-ins, this is going to be your ultimate playbook.
Yeah.
We want to show you how to transform these meetings from, tedious obligations into high-value engines for business efficiency.
It's an absolutely vital playbook to master right now, too, because the landscape of how we actually execute work has shifted dramatically over the last few years. And the tools we use to manage the human beings doing that work, they have to evolve just as quickly.
Yeah.
You simply cannot use a 2015 management playbook in a modern distributed environment. It just fails.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the way most people are running their one-on-ones right now is fundamentally broken. Think about the standard format, right? Using a one-on-one just to get a basic status update from an employee is it's like calling a meeting just to read yesterday's newspaper out loud.
That is such a good way to put it.
It's just so inefficient. You're completely ignoring the actual processing power, like the human empathy, the strategic problem solving sitting right in front of you. It completely misses the whole point.
It really does. And to understand why misusing that time is so detrimental today, we have to look at the psychological context of modern work. We're living in a predominantly remote and hybrid reality now.
Right.
In the past, managers could rely on what we call ambient awareness in a physical office.
Ambient awareness.
Yeah, ambient awareness. It's that passive stream of data you collect just by, existing in the same physical space as your team. So you could walk past a desk and see someone furiously typing with a scowl.
Oh, yeah, the angry typing.
Exactly. Or you notice they're lingering a bit longer at the coffee machine looking totally exhausted.
Yeah.
That passive data told you exactly when to intervene. But today, those organic touch points are completely gone.
Yeah, they really are. You only see people when they're, on for a scheduled video call. The ambient data stream has essentially been cut off.
Exactly. And because that ambient data is gone, we require much richer, highly intentional communication to preserve trust. A check-in isn't just about tracking a project's timeline anymore. You have specialized software for that, right?
Right, like Jira or Asana or whatever.
Exactly. The one-on-one is a dedicated, secure space to raise complex issues. It's really the only reliable mechanism a manager has left to catch early signals of burnout or frustration and to actively protect the working relationship.
And protecting that relationship isn't just some nice, warm and fuzzy HR sentiment either. There's hard empirical data backing up the complete failure of the status update model. The business case for getting this right is massive.
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
The source article highlights some really heavy-hitting data to prove this point. Look at Google's Project Oxygen.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's one of the most famous, rigorous, data-driven studies ever conducted on what actually makes a great manager. And they found a direct, measurable link proving that managers who hold frequent, consistent one-on-one check-ins score significantly higher in overall team performance. Wow.
And retention, too. Plus, Gallup has extensive data reinforcing this, showing that when employees receive weekly feedback, it directly yields higher motivation and engagement across the board.
I want to pause on that for a second because, it sounds great, but I really want to understand the mechanics here. Why is that exactly?
Yep.
Why does talking to a manager once a week suddenly make a developer or a marketer more engaged in their daily work?
It fundamentally comes down to shrinking the feedback loop. Think about steering a massive ship right. If you make a 1-degree adjustment every single week, you stay perfectly on course with minimal effort.
Right.
But if you wait 6 months for an annual or biannual review to find out you've been doing something slightly wrong, You have to make a 60-degree turn. That causes massive organizational whiplash. Frequent check-ins allow people to course correct immediately without penalty.
That makes a lot of sense. And furthermore, regular check-ins allow a manager to explicitly link an employee's highly specific daily tasks to the broader company strategy. When you understand exactly how your specific spreadsheet or, your unique piece of code moves the needle for the entire company's quarterly goals, your engagement naturally rises. You aren't just laying bricks in the mud. You understand that you're building a cathedral.
Oh, I love that. The context creates the motivation. So, okay, the data says we need to do this and we need to do it often.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the golden rules of cadence. The article recommends a rhythm of 30 to 60 minutes, ideally weekly or biweekly.
Yes.
But there is a crucial detail here in the source that I really want to emphasize to you, the listener, right now. It is the absolute golden rule of the one-on-one. Reschedule, don't skip.
It's a hard rule, never cancel.
Let's talk about why that is so critical. Think about the psychological message you send to your team member when you just, delete that meeting from the calendar because you got busy. You're essentially telling that person, whatever random fire drill just popped up on my desk is infinitely more important than your career.
Yeah.
It's a terrible message, it erodes their sense of priority, and it completely fractures trust. You have to preserve that continuity. If Thursday at 2 p.m. suddenly doesn't work, you immediately propose Friday at 10 a.m. It just shows respect.
It does, and how you conduct that rescheduled meeting matters just as much as keeping it on the calendar, especially in a remote environment.
Right.
The article brings in a highly specific example using Zapier, which is a company absolutely famous for its highly effective, globally distributed teams. Zapier has a strict mandate: if you cannot be in person for these weekly check-ins, you must use high-quality video.
Wait, really? Mandatory video?
Mandatory. You need strong internet, clear audio, and the camera must be on. You cannot default to a quick phone call or just a Slack chat.
I imagine that ties right back into replacing that ambient awareness we lost.
Precisely.
Right?
You need to preserve those vital nonverbal cues. Seeing someone's facial expression when you give them constructive feedback, or noticing the tension in their shoulders when they talk about a project, it's essential for maintaining what we call psychological safety.
Let's pause on psychological safety because that's a term that gets thrown around in corporate seminars a lot. We aren't just talking about making people feel comfortable and coddled, right?
No, not at all.
We're talking about a specific mechanism.
Correct. Psychological safety is not about lowering standards or just being nice. It's the established team climate where an employee feels safe enough to take an interpersonal risk. It's the mechanism that allows someone to look at their manager and say, I completely mess up this client presentation, or I am totally lost on this new software, without the paralyzing fear that they'll be fired or humiliated.
Right.
If you don't have video on, you cannot read the room to build that safety.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second. I'm going to ask the question. I know some of you listening are probably screaming at your dashboards right now.
Let's hear it.
If I have a massive team, say 12 or 15 direct reports, putting a mandatory weekly 30-minute video meeting on my calendar for every single one of them sounds like an absolute calendar nightmare. I mean, I would spend my entire week just in check-ins. How do we balance this without losing all our deep work time?
It's a very fair, very common challenge, and the source material addresses this specific friction point perfectly. You do not have to be dogmatic and rigid forever. The strategic approach is to start with a weekly 30-minute slot to establish that baseline of trust, safety, and alignment.
Okay, start weekly.
But as the depth of collaboration improves over time, or if your team size is simply too large to sustain that, you shift that cadence to biweekly.
So it's a dynamic schedule, not a static one.
Exactly. The key is that you default to weekly, remain flexible to transition to biweekly, and this is the secret: you revisit the cadence quarterly with the employee.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, you adjust the rhythm to match the current workload and goals. If a team member is taking on a brand new, highly complex project with a lot of ambiguity, maybe you bump them back to weekly for a month to provide closer support. If they're an absolute veteran in a steady state mode, bi-weekly is perfectly sufficient. It's about finding that sweet spot.
Oh, that is a great relief. So protecting that time on the calendar builds the trust. But, if you secure those 30 minutes just to sit there in awkward silence or blindly read down a project task list, you've completely wasted the opportunity.
Total waste.
So how do we engineer the actual conversation to ensure it's productive? Now, the article provides this brilliant, highly structured yet flexible blueprint. It's called the There's Yours Future 30-minute blueprint. Let's break down how this engine actually runs.
It's a remarkably elegant template because it treats that 30-minute slot as 3 equal 10-minute parts. This gives the meeting total predictability, which significantly lowers anxiety for both parties.
Right, so the first 10 minutes is theirs. The rule here is you open with a predictable ritual, something really simple like, what's on your mind today? And this is genuinely the hardest part for a lot of managers. You let them have the mic first without interrupting.
That intentional silence is critical. There's a deeply ingrained cognitive bias called psychological anchoring. In any conversation, whoever speaks first essentially sets the boundaries and the anchor for the rest of the discussion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so if a manager opens the meeting by saying, all right, let's talk about the Q3 launch, the employee's brain automatically anchors to the Q3 launch. They will literally suppress or forget the crucial interpersonal roadblock they originally wanted to bring up. By giving them the floor first, you allow them to direct the true priority.
Wow, psychological anchoring. That completely flips the dynamic. Okay, so after their 10 minutes, the next 10 minutes is yours. This is the middle block where the manager takes the floor for focused feedback, clarifications, and checking past action items.
Right, making sure performance gaps are clear and solvable.
And then the final 10 minutes is dedicated to the future. This is so important because it forces both of you to look up from the daily grind. You use this time for long-term career goals and alignment with team priorities.
It ensures the employee knows you're invested in their trajectory, not just their immediate output.
Exactly. Now, if we look closely at that first section, the theirs block, there's a massive trap a lot of managers fall into. The article makes this nuanced distinction between an employee needing to vent versus an employee presenting a solvable problem.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the There's Yours Future framework is deeply rooted in active listening and psychology. As a manager, you have to be highly attuned to what kind of conversation is actually happening. When an employee is venting, say, they're just incredibly frustrated by a difficult client call, your role is simply to hold space.
You don't try to fix it right away.
Exactly. You reflect their feelings, you show empathy. That sounds incredibly frustrating. I completely understand why you're stressed. You do not jump in with a wrench trying to fix the emotional engine.
Because if you try to fix a venting session with logic, the employee just feels dismissed.
Precisely. It backfires. However, if the issue they're bringing up is a solvable problem, like they're lacking budget for a tool, then you pivot. You shift out of empathy mode and into defining fixes. Recognizing which mode you need to be in grows trust faster than almost anything else.
And you can actually engineer the situation to know exactly which mode you'll need to be in before the meeting even starts. The text highlights prep work as an absolute superpower. You share a lightweight agenda before the week even starts.
Co-creating those topics in advance builds a profound sense of ownership.
Yeah, I mean, think about how empowering that feels as an employee to have a shared document where you can add a private item to the agenda on Tuesday and know your manager's going to see it and mentally prepare for Thursday.
And from the manager's perspective, collecting that mundane status update before the session means you spend your precious 30 minutes actually making strategic decisions.
Which is exactly what we mean when we say high-value engine. But let's shift gears, because a fantastic 30-minute conversation is entirely useless if nothing happens after you log off. Let's move from the execution of the meeting to the post-meeting accountability and how this scales across a whole organization.
Yes, the conversation is merely the spark. The structured follow-up is the engine. The article details a specific dual note system to drive this.
I'm going to challenge that concept for a moment. When I first read dual note system, I thought, wouldn't one unified Google Doc for total transparency be better? Why divide it into shared notes and private notes? Doesn't keeping private notes feel a bit, I don't know, secretive?
It's a common concern, but they serve entirely different functions. First, you have the shared running notes. This is the transparent doc you're thinking of, accessible to both. You co-create the addenda, track progress, spot recurring blockers. It's for alignment.
Okay, so where do the private notes come in?
The private notes belong only to the manager. They're for candid reflections and behavioral context needed for later performance reviews. You need this to protect psychological safety. Imagine you're sharing a vulnerability and you watch your manager type seems highly frustrated today into a shared doc in real time.
Oh, that would be terrible. Instant panic.
Exactly. The shared space is for operational alignment. The private space allows the manager to track nuanced behavioral patterns over time without creating defensiveness.
That makes total sense. So we've got our notes organized. How do we ensure action is taken?
The rule is strict but simple. Capture exactly 1 to 3 clear action items. no more, or the cognitive load gets too high, no less, or it was just a coffee chat. And every item must have a specific owner and a due date.
Who does what by when?
Precisely. Followed by a quick recap email or updating the doc so you pick right back up next week.
So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out. Why does this specific system matter so much for the business as a whole?
When you integrate this structured template into your company's performance management software, something transformative happens. You turn scattered anecdotal feedback into a searchable, objective history of an employee's impact.
And the article brings up a massive benefit to this, which is eliminating recency bias. Let's say you have a rockstar employee who saves a $1 million account in Q1, but misses one email in November. If a manager relies on memory, that missed email in November completely overshadows the heroics of Q1 during the December review.
It happens all the time, and it's incredibly unfair. Without a centralized record, the review is based purely on what the manager can remember from the last 4 weeks. By keeping these running notes in the software, performance conversations become fundamentally objective.
It guides the manager to be fair. But for this to work, the overarching culture has to support it, right? The article notes that HR and leadership must model this behavior.
Yes, culture scales the behavior. If the executives aren't doing it, middle managers won't. And leadership should also explore alternate strategies like daily micro check-ins via Slack for fast-paced teams. The exact format can flex, but the predictability and objective measurement must remain consistent.
I think if I had to wrap this system up, standardizing your one-on-ones into this software-backed template is exactly like using a high-end fitness tracker. Instead of just blindly guessing if you had a good workout, it turns those vague feelings into measurable, trackable growth.
That is a perfect analogy. You're removing the guesswork.
All right, as we bring this deep dive in for a landing, let's summarize the core practical takeaway for you, the listener. Equip yourself with this simple 1.1 template. Keep the agenda employee first. Lean into that there's yours future structure and treat these meetings as a system that surfaces ideas and fast fixes.
And I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. What if we completely stopped viewing the one-on-one as a tedious management duty? What if you started treating it as the absolute most important product a leader actually builds? If your team is the engine, the one-on-one is the diagnostic software that keeps it running.
A brilliant way to reframe it. The meeting is the product. Thank you for tuning in to the SmartKeys podcast. We really appreciate you joining us for this deep dive. If you found this valuable, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, and we highly encourage you to read the full article by Felix Römer. You can find the link directly to it right down in the show notes. Take care of your team, and remember to check that diagnostic software.